Welcome today. It's a bit a new format. The spring conference is a usual one, but we decided to try an event, let's say, around asset management and how we corporate could invest our liquidities. But today we have not only corporates in the room, so we have also invited some private equities, alternative funds, and family offices. So the idea is to cover, let's say, one of the major issue for all these, let's say, investors, how to invest your money to get the best yield, what is one of our major goals, while, let's say, mitigating the risk. So let's start with the first short introduction, and then you see that we have many sponsors, and so we will have to cover a lot of topics. So, as I say, the idea is to really define a strong asset management, and we had a lot of discussion with our members over the last months and years about what to do with the excess cash. We have a pile of cash in a lot of companies, despite the fact that some have huge debt. And it's also an issue because of the high interest rate. And what could we do to optimize this risk return? We can mention that we face some storms, not necessary to remind you that we had the COVID crisis, some wars, a peak in the interest rate after 8 years of a negative interest rate. So it's quite difficult for us, and especially when you think that slightly more than a year ago, in spring 23, we face a bank crisis in the US and also the Credit Suisse UBS story. So one of the major difficulties for us as corporate treasurers or, let's say, potential short-term investor, it's to find the right balance and to know how to put the cursor. Usually, if you put the cursor on more risk, you can increase your return. In the past, with a normal yield curve, we can expect that the longer, the more you can get. These days, with the inverted yield curve, it's maybe not necessarily true, but we can expect that sooner or later, the yield curve will take a more normal shape, I could say. So it's really an issue we discuss with all our members, how to have a good asset management, how to mitigate the counterparty risk, because a lot of people have forgotten that a bank could also be in default. Of course, we have a general context that I wanted to remind you, the fact that we have usually at corporate level, in general, unsophisticated level of product we invest in. A lot of people are still using the term deposit. Nothing against the term deposit, but okay, we know that term deposits have also some disadvantages, and we will talk about that. So is it because of ignorance, because of laziness, because of lack of time, lack of treasury knowledge? A lot of reasons. Maybe we overestimate the complexity of the product. So the idea of today is to talk about the reform, so the regulatory side, the accounting side, to explain the product, to explain how to invest in product through platforms or any other way to invest. So we want to demystify some of the potential product, but not only the ultra-short product, but also to go for the longer product and to see what some of our sponsors could offer to you. And you will have many time after the conference in the other room where we have the cocktail to discuss with some of them if you want to get more information. So again, too big to fail, it's not true with the banks. So it was again reminded to a lot of people, including the corporate, that having a bank deposit and concentrating your cash with one institution could be a risk, and how to assess the risk, because we don't have time, we don't have resources, sometimes we don't have the tool to assess this risk, so it's a big question. And whatever the policy, whatever the tools and the sophistication of the tool you use, it's extremely difficult, because we know that in a weekend a bank could disappear. Thanks to BNP Paribas for this chart, but just to show you that, and again, maybe it's not fully comprehensive, but you have a huge, let's say, a number of products we can invest. We will talk about money market funds, a very short-term product, but we will also talk about other type of product and some structured product, or even longer-term product, because ideally, the best would be to slice and to tranche in your cash to have the best, let's say, return depending on the tenor you can offer. But okay, for that you need to have a good policy and a good strategy. And a lot of corporates, a lot of our members, not only in Luxembourg, but across Europe, because you know that with my role of EACT, I meet treasurers on a daily basis, and we need to have a very strong policy. And a lot of people have, let's say, taken this opportunity to revisit their policies and to make sure that the policies are stronger, to open doors to other products and to look for alternative. And the purpose of today, and thanks to our sponsor, is to cover a lot of good ideas of alternative products. So again, it's quite important to have a policy. It's important to know your risk appetite. The risk appetite could depending on your sector, depending on your, let's say, health, depending on you, the fact that you are a private or publicly listed company. We will talk about regulation because you know that for money market fund we have regulation. Regulation is something that is key for us, and we follow that with a lot of attention at EACT level. We lobby, and I can mention a few regulations, but actually we will talk mainly about the money market fund reform and the potential impact. But when you have regulation, it means also that you have stronger actors, and it means that the sector should be more resilient, what is our also goal at the end of the day. So it's important to make sure that we know and we share the best practices with our member and make sure that we have in place something that is strong and we don't want to face, because we corporate traders are not there to assess a counterparty risk. Of course, we should try to manage it, but we don't have the tool very often, so it's quite important to think about the product you invest in, to try to mitigate that risk, while keeping in mind that we have a relationship with core banks. It's also important to share properly your wallet to make sure that at the end of the day, your core banks are still satisfied by the business. So we need to adopt a strong policy, a strong strategy in a very difficult context with a lot of uncertainties. So we know the context, not necessary to remind you that. The last and most recent event was the, let's say, rate cut by 0.25% last week. So I don't know if it will be the beginning of a longer, let's say, rate cut. We don't know if it was good to be the first to shoot before the US. We'll see, and I'm sure that some of our speakers will comment on that. But again, it's quite important because we are piling up cash at corporate level, and we should also keep in mind, as I say, regulation and also accounting. We will talk about IS7 and the cash equivalent, because we would like ideally to remain cash and cash equivalent on the IFRS. So it's important to have good foundation, to have a good discipline, to make sure that you have the tool to properly manage your risk and to explain that to the management, not to be surprised and suddenly to wake up. And I had a lot of discussion with some of our members, and we realized that after the weekend of the Credit Suisse, a lot of them were in difficult situations where they were in talk and conversation with the CFO, the CEO during the weekend, just to make sure that there are no risk with one of the bank in potential default in these countries. So it's quite important. We also talk about segmentation. Ideally, it will be great for a corporate to segment and to say what is really short-term, medium-term, long-term. But we know that at the end of the day, when you discuss with CFOs, it's very difficult because a lot of CFOs will say, okay, yeah, it's great to have a segmentation, but in theory, a lot of them say, no, it should be daily liquidity. I know large corporates having billions of cash, and they say the major issue, the major, let's say, or top priority is to have the daily liquidity. So again, because of this constraint, you limit your universe of potential product to invest. So ideally, you should segment. In practice, is not really the case at corporate level. It should be something like that, where you follow your seasonality and the flows of your business. You need to have some headroom, because we know that since the COVID, that suddenly your business could disappear. But at the end of the day, it's not really a market practice from our industries, I would say. It's more theories than practice. So again, you have different classes of assets that you can invest, and we will talk about them. And so what are the alternatives you can consider, and what are the advantage or potentially disadvantage of some of the product we will present to you. But again, we would like to have the right mix between a good return with a minimum risk. Again, we can discuss about where to put this product, but I think that it's interesting to maybe to finish with that. So with this chart, an extract from the last EACT survey, where you can see that one of the last questions, what about the cash? We realize that a lot of companies surveyed have an excess of cash, something like more than 50%, what is quite interesting. Sometimes despite debt, but long-term debt. And you can see the product. And when you see the product, you can see that it's rather unsophisticated, and so it's quite impressive. So we had a lot of headroom for diversification of product. So again, what we will try to do today, And thanks to our good speakers, we will try to cover a lot of topics and answer a lot of questions you have around asset management and how to be, let's say, better in terms of performances. So let's have a look further. And just for your information, you will see we have released just today what we have started a guide on asset management and how to optimize your return on excess liquidities without impacting the counterparty risk. That's the, let's say, the aim of this brochure. It's an online brochure. You can download it if you want, and you have, by the way, a lot of interviews of our speakers. So now let's start with our first presentation. Again, thanks to all of our sponsors. I will not list them all, but you will see them on stage very soon.